This scary story took place in October 5 years ago. I'd been working the night shift at Speedway after my day job at Jiffy Lube. Making extra cash for my son's 7th birthday party took 4 weeks. I remember that because it was Friday the 13th and his birthday was on the 14th, that Saturday. So it was my last night moonlighting at Speedway. I was exhausted as I headed home, hoping to get some sleep before his big day. But I wasn't sure it would be possible because of all the coffee I had to drink to stay awake on my shift. So despite the exhaustion, I had a buzz going on in my brain while I was glassy-eyed. To make matters worse, it was a torrential October cold rain, and my windshield wipers needed changing. I could hardly see through the streaks. I drove slowly without music, needing my full attention to maintain the road. I just wanted to get home and get into bed. The methodic rain hitting the windshield and the intermittent squeak of the wipers had me hypnotized. I had to keep talking to myself to stay awake. I was about halfway home and on a back road that ran 2 miles before it that dead ends into the state route. There is little out here and only a few houses, but this girl is walking down the side of the road. Now remember, it's past 2 in the morning. She has no umbrella or jacket and it's pouring rain. As my headlamps fell on her, she stopped walking and looked at my car as I drove nearer. I sighed as I contemplated whether to stop or keep going and pass her by. There was no time for anyone to be out walking in this rain, so my compassionate nature won. I stopped putting down the window and shouted over the rain, "Do you need assistance? Can I give you a ride?" She, without answering, opened the back door and sat down, murmuring, "I'm going to the end of the road." I put the window up and concentrated again on driving. As I went, I asked her why she was out in the rain this time of night. She said she was in a hurry to get to where she was going, and there were no Ubers this time of night. "That makes sense," I said. I introduced myself as Bob, and she said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Gretchen. Thanks for picking me up." After that, no words were spoken. I was focused on seeing through the rain and staying on the road. I stopped as we approached the state route where this road dead ends. I said, "End of the road. Where to from here?" I looked into the rearview mirror. She wasn't in the reflection. I turned around and she wasn't in the back seat. I quickly pulled the car to the side of the road and got out, opening the back door, and the entire back seat was empty. I looked back down the road into the dark rain with only an occasional street lamp lighting the road, and it was desolate. No one in sight. She could not get out of the car while I was driving. I was questioning my sanity standing in the rain. I looked again into the back seat and felt around with my hand. The seat was dry. How is that possible? She was soaking wet when she got into the car. The seat would have to be wet. I was horror-struck, confused, and dizzy with astonishment. I staggered into the road in bewilderment, frightened by what just happened. Then I looked up, and to the right of the road was the cemetery of the Holy Cross. Then her words came back to me. "I'm going to the end of the road." Have you ever looked into the eyes of a murder victim? I have, and this chilling nightmare still haunts me. I will tell you the story in detail. When I was 17, I was a senior in high school in Wichita, Kansas. In those days, we celebrated Columbus Day on October 12th, giving us a long weekend. It was traditional for kids to take that weekend and go camping as the weather was still lovely. My best friend and 2 other good friends wanted to take the epic adventure. They planned to drive to Capulin Volcano National Park in New Mexico and camp and hike there. It's a 6-hour drive, but there were 4 of us to split the gas and share the driving, so it wouldn't be a problem. We could leave right after school on Friday. We would have our tents up before midnight at the campground. We would have all day Saturday and Sunday to hike, explore, and drive home on Monday. The road was quiet as we were 4 hours into our drive and onto a back road heading to Capulin by then. It had been dark for several hours and everyone else was sleeping. I was the driver. Then I saw car lights just off the road in the distance sitting in a cornfield. I pulled over and said, "Hey guys, wake up. I think someone has run off the road." Rod said, "They are probably picking corn. My grandpa always harvests this time of night in October. Keep going." "I don't think so." I said, "It looked like it has run off the road mowing down the corn in front of it." 3 of us got out of the car and traipsed the 60 feet into the corn to the vehicle. Rod stayed back in our car. We saw it was idling with its high beams on when we approached the car. All 4 doors were open as if the occupants had left in a rush. There was no evidence of anyone there. We called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" As we searched the car, Rod saw flames rising from the field off to the left, and he went to investigate on his own. We closed the doors and were heading back to our car when we heard the blood-curdling scream of Rod. We shouted in unison, "Rod, where are you?" on hearing his cries. We sprinted through the corn, knocking down stalks to get to him as quickly as possible. As we got closer, we could see the light of a fire and smell a putrid smoke. We 3 tumbled into a clearing. In the center, a smoldering fire was crackling. Rod was kneeling, his hands over his head, screaming and crying. I ran to Rod, knelt beside him, put my arm around him, then looked up into the fire. I froze in terror. Staring back at me was the open eyes of a man, his body burnt. Beneath him, another smoldering body stared up to the sky, unblinking. I counted 4 people, a man and a woman and 2 children. From the remains of the burnt clothing, they were Mexican. It appeared to be a cartel hit on a family trying to escape their treachery and met a gruesome fate. We knew they could not have been here long, and the killers were probably not far away. We made the decision to run and escape ourselves. I could hardly drive, but tried to be calm to avoid attracting attention. All I could see was the sheer terror in the eyes of the family. Whoever killed them had a great deal of hate in them and were pure evil to do what they did and then to pile the bodies and light them afire. We agreed never to speak of this to anyone for fear of reprisal by the killer. We knew we had to be silent. It was difficult, but we knew we had to do it. We drove on to Capilan Volcano and pretended nothing had happened. We never spoke a word, but we all could see the horror in each other's eyes. We returned on Monday as scheduled, telling our families only about the mountain and hikes we took. No mention of the family burned in the field. It has been many years, and I am still afraid to tell this story even now. This should never happen to anyone, but it did. I was 16, and I was invited to a Halloween party. I'm not the most popular girl in school. I'm a bit awkward and timid. To be invited was very exciting for me. Sometimes I feel passed over. My mother said, "Smile at everyone and say hello. Everyone will be in costume, and so will you. So relax, express yourself, and have a great time. Everyone will like you." She gave me all the confidence I needed. I went to Cinderella. How appropriate, don't you think? The party was extensive and took up most of a street that had been blocked off by police. Nearly all the school was there. The Cryptickers was a band made up of the school music department members. They were ripping hot in costume, and everyone was dancing except for me. I was too embarrassed, even hidden behind my costume makeup. And by the way, I was beautiful in costume. I knew nearly everyone by name, but I really didn't know anyone. Only the girl who invited me and maybe 3 others. And they were off dancing and socializing. I was just hanging next to the wall, watching all the crazy costumes moving in the street and listening to the music. So I'm in my own little world, but I'm really anxious to be part of the scene and more than a wallflower. It was then that a guy came up to me. He is in a Dracula costume, and I have to say looks pretty authentic. I couldn't tell his age exactly, but he seemed older than a high schooler. He wasn't big and muscular or anything, but he was well built. Perhaps a baseball player kind of shape. He approaches me and says, "Good evening, my name is Count Dracula, and I come to suck your blood." I replied, "I am Cinderella, but I have seemed to have lost my way to the ball." He bowed and extended his hand. "Let me escort you if I may." I was fearful to take his hand, but my mother's words were splashing around in my head, so I extended my hand and closed my eyes. He took my hand and gently led me to the mob dancing in the street. It's much easier to let your fears and inhibitions go when you are behind a mask or painted face, as I was. So I let go. I was dancing with Dracula and busting moves I'd never done before. Dracula was all over me, but I didn't care because, well, I wasn't me. I was Cinderella, although a little naughtier Cinderella than you may remember from the ball with Prince Charming. I was having a blast. Best time ever. Then Dracula took my hand and led me away from the inner circle of wild dancing. I told him thank you for the dancing, it was so much fun, but I really must find my friends now. He says in a Dracula voice, but wait, I haven't sucked your blood yet. The adrenaline is running high in me as I am having the best time of my life, and I let him once again take my hand. Without a word, he leads me down an alley to the street behind the block party. I ask, "Where are we going?" He replied, "For the time of your life." I could barely hear the music from the block party when he grabbed me roughly and pushed me to the ground. Before I could scream, he had his hand tight over my mouth, and his lips were at my ear, and he whispered, "And now I'm gonna suck your blood." Terror bit me like a mad dog. Dracula ripped my cheap Cinderella blouse costume with one hand as easily as tearing paper. I'm blind with fright. He has me pinned with his body weight. I did the only thing I could do. I bit his hand as hard as I could. He bellowed and slapped me hard across the face, but he was sitting up on top of me, holding his hand. That freed my hands to fight. I jabbed him in his throat, and he fell onto the ground, gasping. I rolled in the other direction, scrambled to my feet, and ran. I ran back to the Halloween party, where I'd be safe with the crowd. When I entered the party, my shirt was torn and my bra was all I had. I had lost a shoe in my escape as he grabbed at my foot as I got up to run. I was the true Cinderella back to rags. I was crying, and everyone gathered around me as I gasped. "I've been attacked." The police at the end of the block were summoned, and I filed a report. But Dracula was never seen again.